session, we're going to cover as much material as we can on painting eyes, covering both animal eyes and human eyes. I have a lot of reference material, and I'm hoping I can do quite a bit of demonstrations on my canvas here. I did a lot of research and wanted to get this assembled in this short period of time that I can cover. One of the first things I want to do is cover the animal basics. I want to express to you how you want to capture mood to portray realism and use sharp photographs for your best work. I have some references for birds, and this is a photograph of a adult heron, and actually this is a blue heron, and you can see very closely how the circular shape of their eyes, they have very beady little eyes. I want to express that the most common mistake that beginners have is they think every bird has to have an eye, depending on whatever size it is. I have a brush here, and I'm going to come up here to the top, and just for you, if you're a beginner, if you're going to paint a bird, and it's a little small bird in the distance, say just a little down and up stroke like that, if you can't see the detail of the bird's body and everything, or you can barely see his body, remember how tiny that the eye is in relation to the body of the bird. So you would not want to take and put an eye in that. I have so many students when we put seagulls in our seascapes that they insist on putting a dot in there for the eye, and it really throws everything off of proportion. So birds' eyes are very, very beady, very small. And a lot of other eyes that are very similar are the cats and the dogs. But let's go first with the talk next about some cat's eyes, because I have quite a bit to share with you on that. Small cats have contractual eyes. They're capable of becoming slits in light or round in poor light. And yet bigger cats like tigers and lions have circular eyes, and their pupils will reduce more to a spot. So you can see in this picture and in these little pictures of the kittens that I have for reference how that the cat's eye, it can be elliptical or vertical in shape as it dilates or it contracts towards the light impact. So the stronger the light, the smaller. That can become the tiniest little #1 slit in there, but it is more, it's cuter, just like this little kitten right here with its big, big little eyes. It's cuter to make these large. But they point basically from about 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. If this were a circular clock, you want to make sure that it doesn't tilt, because it's always in a vertical mode. So you want to be sure that you do that. So we have a demonstration here that I have done on a previous show, but I wanted to bring it back for reference because I'm not going to have time to paint all these eyes. I am going to do some painting on some of them. But for the cat's eyes, you can see how placement, you need a lot of color value to achieve a good impact in the eyes. There's sometimes when I do this particular cat's eye on a painting, it takes almost 9 colors to achieve that. And you want your lighter and your darker colors. They look pretty funny in this particular block-in that I have in this reference piece, but the positioning builds from 6 o'clock where your moisture in the eye and more light hits the eye, and then it goes up. But those aren't the actual highlights. As I move it up, this is exactly the same as the up placement, but it's blended. Each band of color gets merged and goes down into the next band of colors, and you cross blend where each color connects. You don't want to lose all the different values. This is what gives that moisture and wetness to the eye. The eyeball, which is a circle or spherical shape, is covered partially by the eyelid, depending on the nature of the cat's look. And then, of course, you have a highlight and a reflective light. And I'll get into that when I demonstrate that more. But to show you how those particular eyes, here's just a painting that it's quite dark, and I don't know if you can see the full impact of the eyes, but this painting, the whole painting is the eyes of the cat. And if you don't learn how to do eyes properly, then you're going to find that you're going to lose a lot of the impact. Let's set this right over here. So there are other eyes that are like a fish and an owl. They also have very round circular eyes. And I have a couple of other paintings for reference, like the fish has a very flat-shaped eye, and it has a strong dramatic impact. So if you're doing an underwater scene, then you want to make sure that the whole character of the painting, a poorly done eye is going to be stand out very dramatically in your painting. So you want to be sure you do that. Almost all animal eyes are like ours. They're spherical balls, and the upper and lower lids partially cover the balls. They're more round shape in animals, the socket and the way the lids cover, and they're more almond shape in the human eye. So you want to find that there is a big difference there. I also have a picture of a dog, and it happens to be my dog. I have a little, actually we have a couple of puppies at home, but my dog is a little Shih Tzu, and you can see that in the reference painting that his eyes are pretty well covered by his hair. But again, it's very important to get a nice highlight and a nice impact in the eye of that particular distance, even though the hair does cover it. All eyes have the same components. They have a tear duct, they have an iris, a pupil, a lower lid, which is very light, an upper lid, which can be very heavy folds, eyelashes, and eyebrows. I want to demonstrate on the next reference piece on a horse. Now, I have a picture here that I use for a reference in a painting that we'll see in a few minutes. And this particular reference piece, it shows very much these components. And I think when we get later on to painting the human eye, we'll see all these components broken down even better. But let's do a quick demonstration in this area using this for reference of a horse's eye, because it is most similar to the human eye. So I'm going to use acrylics today, and I'm going to use a couple of small brushes, and that's the finished painting that I did using this for a reference piece. And let's see if we can real quickly capture that eye and show you how I managed to put it into that large painting. I have done in advance with a magic marker all my drawings. Now, I don't recommend using your magic marker too strongly, especially under the acrylics, because the acrylics don't cover as well. I normally would be working in oils, but since this is just quick demonstrations, the acrylics will serve the purpose. We want to first start with a little bit of I think I'm going to use just a little bit of burnt umber. And being as this is nice and dark, and I have some premixed colors here, and I'm just using a small brush. I want to get just a little bit of the darker tints, and I'm go over this black magic marker and put in a little more of the shadowing up underneath the eyelid, because they have a nice fold of an eyelid up there. In fact, they have a couple of them. So I need a little more moisture in my brush, get a little more water. And let's go just above the eyelid so that we'll be able to get a little contrast. That's more like shadowing. I guess you could consider that like the bags under the eye. We'll get that for contrast, so then we'll just kind of blend out a little bit so that it doesn't look too stilted in here. Okay, nice little pocket of shadow would be back in here where the fold of that, let's see if I just kind of prop that up there, maybe you can still see it a little bit. I'm using this kind of for reference. Now, because I have so much paint on here in that black magic marker, I'm going to have to work the colors a little brighter than I normally would. I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre to see if I can kind of brighten up down in the lower. This is about 5 o'clock where the light's hitting him. And I'm going to kind of pull that around just a little bit. In fact, I'm going to have to black that in because we don't need that. I'm going to change colors very quickly. I'm going to go to kind of an orange or a red right on the brush. And I'm going to kind of build that. And you'll find that it'll look almost as if his eye is going to be bleeding, but it's not. And so we need that warmth. So as I get to that color, I kind of lightly blend and crosshatch back down into the color below, trying not to lose it. Okay, now actually the horse's eye, it has more coloring. Their iris seems to go a little further down, but I need to get a little darker in that. I'm cutting into the pupil area a little bit, but I will paint that back out. Let's go a little darker, maybe a little sienna type cast, and go a little richer into the shadow. Go back over here, that actually needs to be a little bit darker. Okay, back up in here, I want to wipe the brush for a minute and be sure to capture that skin. As I mentioned earlier, they all have a thin, light colored line at the base to show the wet edge of the lower edge. This kind of is what sits the eye down, and that's tissue or skin, and I'm going to just use a light value right in there for this moment. And let's go back in and maybe put a little bit right in that section. Okay, we'll do a little bit of the lid, and I just use a light tan for that, just kind of picking up a little color and go over the upper lid so that it stands out a little bit more. Once you find your basic positioning of objects, it's just a matter of kind of block in. And a good drawing is the best establishment you can get of anything. And I'm just going through a little rough diagram here today to try to give you a little idea. Going a little darker back into shadow, and so I can really recess that really back in and set the eye back into the socket. And I think you'll see how maybe a little bit of black acrylic to darken that pupil in, because it really should have been more rounded in its initial look. And then the spark in his eye, I'm going to pick up another brush so that I can get a little bit of light. And I don't use a pure white, a little bit of an off-white. I'm going to come up and probably just about 2 o'clock put a little spark in his eye. And you want to get maybe soften a little bit on the corners, bring it a little bit over the line. And if it gets dirty, you can always come back in and redo it. Across from it, the catch light that comes down across from it, I'm going to use a little cooler. And it would be opposite on the clock, down over in the iris. And I'll refer to some more of these down here. And that helps keep that quite moist. Sometimes I use the handle of a brush to kind of blend slightly. But I think you can see how just positioning and coloring, usually a lot of blending will enhance it. But if I get the components of the eye in the right place, like the tear duct right down in here, a little warmth in the tear duct is very important. I'll use a little bit of red on the brush, and right down in the tear duct area, I'll just put a little extra warmth. Sometimes I even highlight that just slightly, but you don't want to do that too much. So that gives a little rough indication of how you can build from the structure. I need a couple of other lights and darks in there, but I want to be able to have more time today to spend on the human eye. But you want to make sure that you can catch good life in the animal's eyes or any eyes as you paint them. Okay, so we've covered pretty well most of these. Let's just talk a few more points, and I'd like to cover a few more other than the horse. Let's go and talk a little bit about squirrel eyes. They're a little unique and a little different. Although all the eyes have the thin light covered line at the bottom, at the base, to show the wet edge of the lower lid, the squirrel is very unique in the fact that it almost has no visible lids. They can't be seen. So it's really the fur goes right up to it, and you do not have the advantage of having a distinctive eyelid, top lid, or lower lid. But it's very important that you get the spherical shape of the pupil in properly, and then it's basically fur, so you don't have a hard lid that closes down distinguishably. Most eyes have a single highlight that's placed off center, and when I drew these, I just specifically related to and left a little white canvas showing so that you could get a little idea of the highlight on the, like on the squirrel's eye. So that's just the white canvas, but normally that would be painted in. A deer, they're very obvious spherical form. I did have some pictures and all, but I didn't bring out all my pictures today so that you can see a few done. I'm more concerned today with the human eye. But they're very obvious in their spherical form, and in most animal eyes, they're usually less contrast of the pupil to the surrounding eye. Being too obvious with the contrast can give an animal a wild stare. It can make him really look kind of cartoonish. So just as I did up on the horse above, you can see that I kept the values very close from the pupil, and I kept the eye very dark. If I had left the pupil black and then made a very light tinting for the whites of the eyes, or actually it's not white, but that color, it would have made him have a very frightened look. So you keep the values very close in that manner. For a moose, he's unique in the sense, just as the deer is above here, that they have very intricate folds that distinguish their dramatic eyes. Elephants and buffaloes, they also have this fold of material for the upper lid that helps characterize theirs. But in all similarities of all, if you look down the whole list, they are all very round. The pupil is very distinguishable. And even though our eyes have a round pupil, we have more of an almond shape to the other. So one of the last pictures I'd like to show you is a cute little picture of some bunny rabbits. And that particular, the bunny rabbits, you can see the eyes don't have a lot of color. They're really just almost all dark with a little bit of a highlight and a catch light in it. So that's a very interesting point where all the animals' eyes still have the same components that the human eyes do. As we start to discuss the basics of eye portraiture for humans, I want to stress to you the reference material in books. There are hundreds of books on the market that cover basics in portraiture, portrait drawing, portraits in pastel if you don't want to get into paints early. You want to make sure you get yourself good reference material so that you can be guided into the placement. But I have for you the basics of steps of how to get a good shape to the human eye. Let's go up to the, my demonstration canvas for just a moment and look at some of my progression of the steps that would take to get a good eye structure. Up in the top box, or the first drawing I have, there are two lines that intersect. There's a curve, a gradual curved line, but then it drops off to a straight. Okay, that's if the nose were over here in this direction. So there's a curved line and it drops to a straight. Then you have another curved line coming from below, but then it drops off to being straight. So it'll end up where these two lines right here are basically parallel and straight, while the other has a distinctive curvature to it. Now, in the next step, after you find your positioning of your curve and your straight lines, you bring the straight line to the inside where the tear duct would be. So you would bring the straight line, would hook underneath the lower lid line and indicate a tear duct positioning. And then you would have the thickness of the flesh for the lower eyelid, which would be just a small area that would diminish underneath the pupil. So once you find the positioning of the eyelid, lower lid, and the tear duct. So then we move forward. The pupil is one of the most important parts that you have to position. It rests on the lower lid, actually just basically sitting right onto it, and that's the iris area. The pupil is perfectly centered into the iris. Now what happens with the iris, though, it is partially covered by your upper lid. So the circular spherical ball that is necessary for the pupil is partially lost. Most people, when they lose that with the eyelid, they have a tendency to want to move the pupil lower so that it sits more equally down here. So you can see it's a little more distance between the bottom section and the pupil than the top. It's because you don't see that top part. Now, in the human eye, you can normally get lots of strong indications of refraction lines. These are the lines in the coloring of the iris that can be very dramatic in some people and not so distinguishable in others. But these are all like spokes of a wheel. And usually it's lighter up next to the pupil, depending on your color tinting and the color of the eye, and then it gets darker. So that kind of varies with different colorings. And of course you have shadowing. Now as we progress to the next step, we want to discuss a little bit about the upper lid and the lashes and the shadow of the lashes. What you want to realize is that the upper lid, of course, is larger, and it has a kind of an upward climb and a kind of a level top, and it's almost like a fold up in there, and then it comes down over the upper eyelid. The shadow from eyelashes would be covering underneath the lid, and this recesses the eye back. Without that shadowing in there, you're going to find that it will make the individual too bug-eyed. Now, eyelashes are very interesting in the sense that they grow in 2 to 3 rows, and they're different lengths. Most people have a tendency to just put one row and very stark in the same distances. The top lashes actually grow down, then up, and the bottom lashes go up, then down. So if you think about it in simplicity, it's almost like making a check mark on the right or a backward check mark on the left. So you have that little feeling that the eyelash comes down from the lid and then goes back up. And then when you're at the bottom, you have to actually start kind of up and hang down. So there's a distinctive range of turns that you don't need to get to it. Now, as you come down a little farther, these are all the components put together with an eyebrow, a little shadowing for the nose, but you have all these components, which are usually found both in animal eyes and human eyes. Now let's go talk a little bit about the positioning. The positioning of the eyes are in an egg-shaped sphere, and you come halfway down to find the position of the eyes. You need a vertical dissecting line, and there's 5 eye widths located from one side of the sphere to the other. There's 1 eye length between the 2 eyes, and there's an equal eye length to the left and to the right. So you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 breakdowns, and the eyes fit in between each one of the other ones. So that is your positioning. Now as you look at this little sketch that I have right next to it of this component's position, I didn't even finish doing some of my drawing here, but the eye should have, another thing you want to do is make the eyes 3-dimensional by shading of values. And I think you can see that. I have a portrait of my husband that I'd like to use for reference, and there's a lot of different values in his eyes to give more dimension and depth. It's very hard in a black and white sketch here to capture that. So this is my husband, Bill, of 27 years, and this is a portrait I did, and trying to capture his happy eyes, because they're always happy, is always a challenge. Now the eyes should have the lightest value and the darkest value in the portrait. That's very important. That's where the whole window of the soul is, that you want to tell a story, and I have later, I'll be showing you some other unique pictures. So we want to go on down and look at about how an eye would be at a 3/4 view. Okay? When the eye turns, the length of the eye changes, not the height. Okay? So if you start turning the head, then you're going to find that you will lose the distance in the length, but not in the height. And I have a reference picture of that, of a young lady who is looking kind of back over her shoulder, and you can see how her eyes look foreshortened in length, but the height of it is the same. And of course, the coloring can be very different depending on the individual coloring. She has lovely violet eyes. Okay, there's as you turn the head to the side, I have a little diagram over here. You want to see that the same components are always affected into this, that there is still that ball, only now we're looking over on the side of the ball, and the eyelids wrap that ball. So we want to keep the idea that we have the pupil looking from the side would move to the left, the iris would surround that, and then of course you would have your shadowing, your eyelashes from the top. They come down then up, and then from the bottom they come up then down, which you want to make sure you keep that in mind. You want to never, never, never outline the bottom lid line darkly. Now I have it in my diagram up here with a little bit of a magic marker, but when you paint that, that is captured with a light. And let's see if we can do a little demonstration for a moment and go through these components and see if we can put them all together. I'm using acrylics to demonstrate still, so I want to capture some of these areas. I'm not going to go really into the exact steps because with acrylics, I'm going to be working so fast they won't have time to dry. But let's go over the straight and the curved lines. We have kind of a curved line here that drops to the straight, and then we have the curved line here that comes up and moves up to the straighter area there. The next step, again, would be to find the tear duct capturing area, and I'm going to have to change to a lighter value of flesh to kind of give that little bit of tissue right there on the lower lid, because that is never done with a dark line. That's very important. Okay, after we do that, we want to block in the pupil, which is pretty well done with the magic marker. So we can just use the magic marker today for the demonstration, but let's go to the iris, and let's put some, we'll just make a nice brown eyes, because I have most of that coloring mixed in. We're just going to block in a little bit of iris color, a little light, and I'm going to change very rapidly to some other colors, because I'm going to have some nice warm brown eyes, which that's what my husband has, so I'm going to just go ahead and we'll do the brown-eyed painting. Getting some darks and blending very quickly, which is not the best way to do it, but just for the demonstration purposes. As it goes up into the shadowing area, I'm going to use a little more darkness. In fact, I'm going to add a touch of blue to that, just to get it even darker. Shy of being as dark and black as the other eye. Now, in the shadows back into the whites of the eyes, they're actually not white. I'm going to use a little bit of a fleshy tone to go in and start putting a little bit of this in and actually pick up some of the browns and see if I can get that in. That's a little too light. Let's go a little more of a violet in there. Yeah, that's better. Let's make this more of a skin tone into that area. That's much better. And a little darker as it goes up into the shadowing, up underneath. Trying to cover up my lines a little bit as I go, blending lightly. In the tear duct area, I want to put that little dash of red. Oh, that's bright red. Bloodshot eyes if I'm not too careful. Let's go a little more light on the bottom lid, just kind of putting in areas, the eyelid above. We'll put it brighter up in this area. I don't even think I'm going to get time for eyelashes today, but we're just giving a little rough idea of how this can do. While I'm working on this one, let me show you two cute pictures of a clown that has very expressive eyes. It's really kind of a cartoonish rendering of a fun clown that I teach my students, because I work mostly with beginners, and you want to realize that as I teach, we're using a little simplified. I pride myself in beginners and intermediates. But I think you can see, if I can just real quickly put a little color, maybe we'll give a little blue to the eye. Just change it for a minute. And then a little highlight, and then we'll come back with a little catch light. It's not a very good timing for getting this one as well as I'd like, but I think you get a little bit of an idea of how the eye takes a lot of basic structure. So if you cover these points, if you make sure you go through the basic positioning and everything, I think you can be very successful in painting eyes. So let's work on this one with the little eyelashes and see if you can watch how I shadow and get these little uplifts of lashes. This is Lynne Pittard. I want to invite you to visit our website, www.lynnepittard.com. You will find hundreds of paintings and products for your convenience. We also have available over 70 programs on DVD.
You can learn how to paint or just brush up on your skills. Don't forget www.lynnepittard.com and make your painting experience more memorable.